The Mom with Moms podcast is sponsored by Hackensack Meridian Children's Health. Hackensack Meridian Children's Health is comprised of 2 nationally ranked children's hospitals by U.S. News and World Report and are number 1 in New Jersey. K. Hovnanian Children's Hospital in Neptune and Joseph M. Sanzeri Children's Hospital in Hackensack, as well as pediatric inpatient and outpatient services at JFK University Medical Center in Edison. With access to expert pediatricians and over 200 pediatric specialists across the state, Hackensack Meridian Children's Health prides itself on offering specialized pediatric medical care and surgical expertise. To learn more about Hackensack Meridian Children's Health, visit hackensackmeridianhealth.org/kids. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mom with Moms podcast. We are so excited to be kicking off this amazing partnership with Hackensack Meridian Children's Health today. We're going to be discussing family health care, right, which is a massive topic, and there's lots of things to discuss. But today we have Dr. Moses from Hackensack Meridian Children's Health here today. He is a pediatrician, practices out of Forked River, New Jersey, and we are going to be discussing all things summer safety today. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
First time to Bellworks?
Yes, first time.
Yeah,
Building.
It's a massive building, right? People either know it well or have been like a few times and know it, or and if they haven't, they're like, they've heard about it, right? Yep. And you're like, wow, it's like
I drive past here a lot, but I've never actually physically come in here.
Over to the hospital? Yeah, in Bayshore. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So we are discussing summer safety. Summer is around the corner. Sure. It's basically here. The weather's been beautiful.
Yes,
so it's
been
nice. It's been so nice, and I love summer. I think a lot of parents look forward to summer, but also with little ones, there's a lot of things that you have to be cognizant of. So we have a whole list of questions that we put together for you today, one of which is sun safety. It's a really, kind of, again, a massive topic. It's kind of ever-changing. Yeah. When I was little, when I was a teenager, it was very much like, we wanted to get tan, and we put like sun in our hair, and we put oil on our body, and like I really regret it now because now I have to get Botox and all these things, which is funny because the teens now, like I've talked about this on the podcast before, it's like we have teens in the house, not my son, but my stepdaughter will put like very expensive serums on their Christmas list, and I'm like, when I was that age, I just was concerned about not having acne. That was like my only skincare regimen, and my mom would be like, remember to wash your face, and the kids now are like totally different, which is so funny. But you have to be mindful of what you're putting on your body and stuff like that. And, the suntan lotions it's a huge business, right? So tell me, like, what are some of the things that, you should really be mindful of when choosing suntan lotions?
So as you alluded to, with just the sun in general, one of the most common cancers in America is skin cancer. Right. And the main message is really trying to protect our skin from the harmful UVA and UVB rays. The sunscreen lotion is what we advise a lot, for kids as young as 6 months and older. There's so many different kinds of sunscreen lotion out there. But the main thing is you want one that has what they call broad spectrum coverage, protects from UVA and UVB rays. They have chemical sunscreens and they have mineral sunscreens. I personally advise parents to get the mineral-based ones because they don't absorb the UVA and B rays. They more, reflect it, so to speak. Interesting. And there are a lot of different ones out there, but and you see, SPF 15 and 30 and 50 and 100. Usually we advise at least to have a SPF of 30. SPF stands for sun protection factor. And basically the whole idea is if 30 to about 30 minutes before you're going outside, you want to apply the sunscreen, cover as much body surface area as possible. People always forget, areas behind the ears, the neck, and the face. So you want to make sure you get all your bases covered. Like I said, about 30 minutes before, and typically you want to reapply it every 90 minutes to 2 hours, especially if you're going into the water. Every time you come out, you have to reapply again. So just overall, the advice is to get, the mineral-based sunscreens that have broad spectrum coverage, UVA and UVB.
Okay. And are kids' sunscreens all marketing? Meaning, when you buy something I just kind of transitioned my daughter who's 8 to, I'm like, I'm not buying the kids one anymore. Like, she can just wear ours.
Yeah.
But like all along, I mean, unless they have sensitive skin, is it really like, can you use any sunscreen on a 2-year-old?
You can. And again, it's really the ones that are chemicals, that we try to avoid, getting on kids' bodies. There's some new research coming out saying that some of those chemicals may be harmful, but there's not enough information out there yet to say, whether to stay away from it completely. So just from my standpoint, to be on the safe side, as long as it's a mineral-based sunscreen, I think it's going to be okay to, put it on kids as well. The SPF 15 may protect you from about 93-94% of the rays. 50, you're getting closer to 96-97%. Anything above that, you're getting, nitpicking, maybe 96.5. So
right.
Typically, once you're at SPF 50, it's fine. But as long as it's a mineral sunscreen, I think it should be fine to use on kids as well.
Are you still getting vitamin D if you have sunscreen on?
You are.
You are.
You are.
So you should have a sunscreen on all the time.
All the time.
No matter what.
All
Even
the
in
time.
the winter.
Even if it's cloudy.
Even if it's cloudy. Even in the winter.
Even in the winter. When you're outdoors, and there is going to be sun exposure. The sun pierces through the clouds too. In the winter, we're not, lounging outside for a long time. So people tend not to use it in the winter, but certainly it's basically you're protecting yourself from the risk of skin cancer. So it's certainly advisable.
How common is skin cancer in children?
It's more common than one would think. I mean, they're probably foggy on the percentages, but you're looking probably close to maybe like 15-20% of cancers in children are some sort of skin-related cancer. So it's something we are seeing.
Okay. Is that the number rising?
It has been rising over the past, I want to say, 10 years. So there's a lot of push to get the information out there about the importance of sunscreen. And it's the whole idea of, I don't want the white residue in my skin. So a lot of times kids fight their parents just because they don't want to look like ghosts, going on the beach and things like that. But the message has been pushed out there daily of the importance of having sunscreen out there if kids are going to be out in the sun.
Okay. And what's the age that you can start using sunscreen on?
6 months.
6 months. So that has not changed.
That has.
We're just talking about all the things that have changed. The guidelines always are. There's always new research coming out, and everything's always evolving. So when my son was little, I didn't have the same. But 6 months was then, and also with my daughter. So I'm good with that one.
It's still
I'm
6
out of
months
the loop with the baby stuff.
And the younger kids, the advice is just keep them out of the sun.
Right.
If you're going to go outside, make sure they're wearing, long sleeve clothing, the wide brim hats, UVA, sunshade. You certainly want to keep even the ones that have sunscreen on. Basically, avoidance is best.
Okay.
I think the hours between like 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's when the sun is at its peak. So, try to not be out there for too long if you can.
And if they are out there for too long, or maybe they're at camp and maybe you're at the beach and you kind of, you're all having a nice time, but you don't realize how hot it is. What are some of the signs to look for heat stroke, sunstroke? What's the difference?
So you have heat exhaustion, and then heat stroke.
Okay.
So heat exhaustion, it's basically when you've lost a lot of fluid and salt from your body from sweating, because the heat is so much, you're sweating, you're having fun, and you forget to replenish what you're losing. So with the heat exhaustion, you see signs like, headache, lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, and the skin, there's just so much sweat. The skin is typically moist. With heat exhaustion, and you can get weak as well. Muscle cramps are a big thing. But with heat exhaustion, it's the kid that's coming back to say, Mommy, I'm tired. You see they're sweating a lot. Maybe they're saying my body hurts. Once you see that, get the kid into a cool place. That's the most important thing. Get them into a cooler environment where there's AC, and just start rehydrating them, with cool fluids, preferably fluids that have electrolytes in it. Your Gatorades and Powerades and, Pedialytes, things that have electrolytes in it. Heat stroke, on the other hand, that's a more severe form of a heat-related illness. With the heat exhaustion, they may have a fever of like 100.4 or 101. Heat stroke, you're not just lightheaded and dizzy. At this point, you're confused. You're hallucinating. Some kids may even have seizures. So this is more of a medical emergency.
Okay.
Temperatures can rise as high as 104
Wow.
in these kids. And with heat exhaustion, you're sweating a lot. With heat stroke, you may not even see sweat, because it's almost like you're so drained of all your fluid that the skin can be really clammy. At that point, you can also see nausea, vomiting, even diarrhea sometimes when you get to heat stroke. In a situation like that, still the whole idea is to get the person into a cool environment. Somebody else is calling 911. If the person is still alert enough to drink, you want to start rehydrating them as well with electrolyte cold beverages. But that's really, the difference is with heat stroke, you're already looking at a kid that's kind of
like disoriented,
okay. And just really not knowing their whereabouts and things like that. So the whole idea is to catch them early before they progress into heat stroke.
Okay, interesting. On the topic of hydration, I was actually thinking about this morning. So it's funny, like just how, different generations, we have different practices. When I was growing up, my mom was very like, we had to have milk with dinner every night. I don't actually do that with my kids. And I don't really know why it wasn't a specific choice, but we do all like walk around with liquids all the time. And it's really, we are like, I've said this a million times on the podcast, we drink ridiculous amounts of water. We buy all the waters. We're like the fancy water. We buy the Essentia. We're like that. We don't buy coffees. We don't buy soda. We don't buy like Starbucks really. But we buy like if there's like a new water, we're like, ooh, that's fun.
Smart water.
Yes, we are that family. So everyone is all. My daughter is actually probably the most sustainably conscious person in our family, and she has like a water bottle that she carries around. So. So she drinks probably about 1 liter of water every day.
Okay.
Is that too much?
So the general rule of thumb is to take your weight in pounds,
Okay.
drop it in half, and drink that number of ounces a day.
Of ounces, okay.
So let's assume it's not my real weight. Let's say I'm 150 pounds. I used to be many years ago.
Right.
And, half of that would be 75. So the whole idea is we're going to be drinking, that amount of water in ounces a day, or maybe on average they say 8 to 10 cups a day, of water is at least a good starting point, so to speak, but it's one of those things where hydration is extremely, extremely important. 1 liter, look, as long as your kidneys are functioning fine, you're drinking, you're peeing, it's can you drink too much water? Yes, you can. But again, as long as you're healthy and your kidneys are functioning fine, it shouldn't necessarily be a problem.
Right.
But she's not having any symptoms, lightheadedness, dizziness, or anything like that.
Right.
And she has a pretty good balanced diet. I don't see why that is overkill, so to speak.
Do you need to be adding? So I'm a runner, and I just started. I found this brand called Element, LMNT, and it's this electrolyte powder that you throw into water, and it's very good. It's a little salty, but I really like it a lot. So I need that just for a different multitude of reasons. But is it something that like you should be conscious of for kids too, like making sure that they're getting electrolytes, or is that not really a factor?
So just hydration in general is important. The electrolytes come into play when you are, playing sports and things like that, where you're sweating a lot. Because again, you're losing more than water. You're losing, salt and, different electrolytes. Or kids that tend to fall ill with stomach bug was going around for a while in the first, few months of this year, vomiting, diarrhea, things like that. When you're losing more than just water. You want to replace more than just water.
Okay.
You know, so in those situations where the kids are out in camp and playing sports and things like that, certainly it's advisable that they, you know, drink beverages that have electrolytes in it. But if you don't have access to that, just plain water is much better than
nothing.
Than nothing. Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. There's so many different things that you can, you know, give them, but it's, you know, I feel like at least they're drinking water.
Exactly. Exactly.
and they're good, and they're not going to be, you know, overheating. But that's, you know, important to know is, you know, we're going into the warmer months, and with that comes pool time, right? Which is so much fun for so many, but also can be very dangerous area if you're not paying attention. So, you know, we talked a little bit about this earlier, all the different companies that are out there, where, you know, of where you can get an alarm that goes off on your pool. Like, I guess there's like different motions or not motion sensors and stuff like that. But what are like the most common things that you're telling your patients to be aware of for pool safety with children?
So, most importantly really is to just make sure your pool is always secure. You know, a lot of states, townships, things like that, you can't have a pool without some sort of fence around it, you know, that has a self-locking gate, so to speak, where no one's just leaving the gate open. Once you open it, the gate locks by itself. Right. So you always want to have a mechanism in place that at least, you know, there's some sort of physical protection around the pool of itself. And then secondly, you know, most drownings happen when adults are around, when somebody's there. You know, we live in the social media / cell phone generation. You know, so if I have my cell phone in my hands while watching my kids swim, I'm not really watching my kids. Yeah. You know, so I tell parents all the time, like, you know, when you guys are out swimming, make sure there's always one person, you know, an adult that can swim that's responsible for always watching the kids. Right. You know, preferably you're even in the pool with them. You know, not one that's like, oh yes, I'm watching the kids, but you're on your phone and things like that. So it's very, very, very important. The other thing is, not everyone can afford swim lessons, but it's a good idea to just, you know, have your kid have swim lessons. Yeah. You know, because it's nice for them to know how to rescue themselves from, you know, drowning situations and things like that. So having kids, you know, just having even just basic background of, you know, swimming and knowing how to be safe in pool areas is certainly important. And this is the other thing we were talking about before as well. You know, when you watch the movies, a kid that's drowning, they're flailing their arms and screaming and shouting. Most drowning doesn't happen like that. A lot of times, you know, the adults are around, all of a sudden it's like, where's Johnny? You know, and you're jumping in the pool trying to pull a kid out from underwater. And
why is that? Because they don't look, because they're under the water probably struggling, but you just can't see that they're struggling.
You can't see they're struggling. A lot of times they're there and their head's leaning back and they're like, almost like they're in shock. Okay. You know, what's going on here? And before you know it, they're underwater. You know, so a lot of times, like I said, you really don't, it's not common for you to see the kids screaming and yelling. So that's why it's so important, you know, to make sure there's always somebody, you know, within, again, preferably in the pool within arm's length of these kids, that, you know, to make sure that we don't have any unforeseen circumstances like that. And, you know, life jackets, life vests, obviously kids, you know, that's also, you know, secondary form of protection to, especially if they're not trained to swim, they can just have fun in the pool, have a, you know, life vest on them to make sure that, again, there is no situation where drowning. Walking around the pool can get very, very slippery. You know, you can trip on pool toys and things like that. So again, just making sure areas around the pool are free of debris. And when kids wear towels, a lot of times we try to cover them up, their whole body, you know, where their arms are like this. So a lot of times, if they slip, they have no form of natural protection to put their hands down. So if you have a towel around the kid and they slip, they're falling face down, or, you know, so you want to put the towel under their armpits. You know, so if you do slip, you can at least try to break your fall with your hands. Wow. You know, so that's something else that's
Yeah,
a
little
tip.
things. I would never even thought of that. Oh, that's interesting. When we were little, we did have a pool, but I think this was before we got a pool. And the neighbor had an in-ground pool next door, and we were at a barbecue. And my mom, we were all there, and we were, like you said, we were all around the pool. I was in the pool. I don't recall exactly what happened because I was little, so I don't I wasn't looking for that. But all I remember was my mom dove into the pool because my sister was drowning, and she, was probably talking with the neighbor and didn't even,
realize it,
like she had her eye on her, but at the same time, like you said, like you're talking or whatever, and you have your eye on the kids, but it was like she said, she's told the story many times that it was like a split second, and she looked over and she realized that she was struggling and got her out, and she was fine. But like a very scary moment and a very good reminder that you like cannot take your eyes off of the kids.
Another thing I actually just remembered also is people have these like little blow-up pools. I don't call it a pool, but for little babies to just sit there and play with water. When you are done, dump all the water out and flip it over.
Okay.
Because you're not going to put a fence around a little blow-up pool, blow-up tube with water in it. So a lot of people have that. So whenever you're done with the kids in there, just make sure you dump all the water out and flip it over, just so your kids don't go wandering in there, when you're not around or when you're not looking.
And probably the bath too.
Exactly. Same.
Does that happen sometimes?
You can drown in the bath.
Oh, gosh. I haven't seen that story in the news, but I'm sure it has happened.
Especially with babies and, bathing babies and things like that. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about. You put the baby in one of those, they have all these baby carrier things so you can bathe them in.
Yeah.
A baby can drown in 2 inches of water. So it doesn't take much. You're not going away to go pick up the phone when you're bathing your baby. Like, you have to be there at all times, focused, and when you're done, again, drain all the water out. So it's just, you just have to be present, at all times when kids are around water.
Okay. We talked a little bit about what they're supposed to be wearing. Is there a certain age? I've seen more and more, actually, where was I the other day? We were at somewhere, and all the swimsuits are out. And I noticed I was getting a present for my 2-year-old niece, and a lot of the swimsuits now are much more, they have more length, right, to them. Either they have short sleeves or longer sleeves, which was also not the case when my daughter was little. So is there a certain age where they should be wearing more coverage? Or should we all be wearing more coverage?
It's coverage again. You're talking about the sun exposure again. If you have the more parts you have covered, the less likely you're going to get sunburn. Have exposure to sun and things like that. But they have bathing suits. Some of them called rash guards. That the surfers use. A lot of those bathing suits have UV protection in them already as well.
Right.
So these bathing suits were typically just for, professional athletes that do water sports and things like that. But now they have those same bathing suits for kids. So it's actually better, to have these bathing suits that have the sun protection infused in them already.
Okay.
So you can't go wrong if you were to have long sleeves to protect yourself. But from a reality standpoint, if you don't have that, just make sure whatever parts of your skin are exposed, have sunscreen.
Okay.
And if you can get the bathing suits that have the UV protection in them, that's also it's one of the newer things that we're seeing.
Okay. Yeah. I noticed in the baby section, so I was curious if maybe certain, once they hit 18 months or 2 years, that their skin's a little bit less sensitive and they can wear, kind of regular bathing suits.
It is. You're right. To that extent. But again, the whole idea is if you had a choice, because they have long bathing suits for 18-month-old 2-year-olds. They have the short ones.
Right.
If you had a choice, I'd probably go for the longer sleeve ones. But if not, just make sure they're protected.
Yeah. So we're all getting outside in the summer too. Out, in and outside of the pool, there's lots of sports happening. There's lots of all just activities that kids can do, skateboarding, biking. I'm sure you see lots of incidents that come into your office all the time.
Yes.
My daughter is, I don't know if it's just a phase or she's growing, but it's she's getting hurt every other second I turn around. She has Band-Aids all over her body at the moment.
It's like my son.
She's always crying about something. I'm like, Mom, I hurt myself. Last night I had to pick her up early from Girl Scouts because she fell. It was like a whole thing. So kids, can get themselves into all kinds of things. Helmets, I know, are very important. What are some things that you are always seeing and can indicate that kids really need to be mindful of?
Certainly. I just saw a patient the other day for a head injury.
Okay.
Yeah, was going down a hill on his bike and fell.
And wasn't wearing his helmet.
Was not wearing a helmet.
Oh.
So I can't tell you how often, over and over again, I never blame the kid.
Yeah.
I always blame the parent.
Right.
Because if you allow your child to ride a bike or go on a skateboard or scooter or whatever without a helmet, it's your fault as a parent. You have to make sure they have a properly secured helmet that they wear. Even if I hear it all the time. I was just riding around in the in the in the driveway or in the cul-de-sac. Most injuries happen right by the house.
Right.
So I tell parents, as soon as you don't move an inch in your car without wearing your seatbelt. And like your helmet is essentially your seatbelt for your bicycle, your skateboards, and things of that nature. So wearing a helmet is very, very important. If you want to go the extra step, like me, the elbow guards and the knee guards and things like that, those are also helpful, especially if the kids are just learning or they're transitioning from a tricycle to a bicycle. For those kids that are in the early stages of just getting comfortable with these bicycles and scooters, it's advisable to offer more protection, with the knee pads and the elbow pads and things like that. But helmet is super, super, super important. I think I can't overstate it.
Yeah. How often do you see injuries with elbows and knees?
All the time.
All the time.
Scrapes and bruises, and especially for my skateboarders.
Okay. So even if with a scooter, like you should be wearing a helmet.
You should be wearing a helmet.
Okay.
You should be wearing a helmet.
Is wearing a helmet, is it a law or is it a guideline?
Good question. It's
I think it might be a law.
It probably is a law.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. If it's not a law, we should make it a law.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have a policeman driving around, looking for kids with that helmet.
Maybe my parents told me it was a law, and that's why I think that
but it's for riding a motorcycle on the road is a law, to have a helmet on. So I would think even like if you're riding your bicycle on the road and, you don't have a helmet, I'm pretty sure a cop will pull you over. But,
yeah,
it's probably a law if you're on the road, but I think it's, a guideline probably as well too.
Right.
So.
The playgrounds also make me nervous. Do you see any injuries of kids falling off playgrounds?
All the time. And there's really what safety tips can you advise for a kid that's on the monkey bars and falls and lands? Yeah. Right. So as long as you just want to be close to them, and try to make sure they're not roughhousing or cutting in line and things like that when they're being very aggressive. Excuse me. That's when most of these injuries happen. In the trampoline, we get a lot of trampoline injuries, and that mostly happens when there's more than one person on there.
Okay.
Because if I'm jumping and landing and you're in the air, sometimes you hit their head, or you land before I land, and the platform is not flat when I'm coming down; it's sunken. So I twist my ankle. Sometimes the netting around the trampoline is not strong enough, or it's got holes in it, and kids fall out. I had a patient yesterday. So it's like kids fall out, they hit their head. So trampoline, preferably just one person at a time. And just. It's hard, all the kids are there, they're jumping around, but it's less injuries happen when there are less kids,
right.
Jumping on the trampoline at the same time.
I noticed some parents are putting the trampolines in the ground. Have you seen that at all?
I've seen that.
Yeah, where it's like completely put into the ground, so they don't have to worry about them falling off, but they still have to worry about them colliding.
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. But that was smart, though. I've never, we don't have a trampoline. It just always made me so nervous.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it was at least like eliminates one of the
certainly
one of the worries of all the things that could happen. Do you see a lot of concussed patients more so in the summer?
Yes, just from sports.
From sports.
And every sport. You know, football certainly gets a bad rap just because of all the, you know, all the
Tackle.
stories that we hear in the
Yeah.
tackling and the NFL and things of that sort. But I think I get most of my concussions from cheerleading.
Interesting.
Believe it or not. You
Wow.
know, the spotter didn't catch, you know, they get flipped up in the air. So we get a lot of head injuries from our cheerleaders.
Wow.
Yep. Soccer players from the ball hitting their head. I know it's I don't know if it's adopted around America, but there's a lot of laws in place at kids 13 and under are not allowed to strike the ball with their head, even though it's a part of soccer, but just because they don't have the right techniques yet, because again, we see a lot of concussions from just the soccer ball hitting their heads.
Right.
You know, so yes, we do see a lot of concussions in the summer.
Okay. We love to hike in the summer. We have 2 dogs. I love to go. I love being outside. We go on a lot of walks all the time. Have been lucky enough. We've seen a few ticks in the house recently, which is kind of strange because I'm pretty good about making sure the animals are covered and they have like the Seresto things and all this stuff. But I'm sure that you see tick bites all the time. That's really scares the crap out of me. What do you recommend, especially with girls and long hair?
So cut it off and look like me. Just kidding. So right off the bat with ticks, they're very sneaky. You know, if a mosquito bites you, you know right away. You know, with ticks, there's a misconception about ticks jumping. Ticks don't jump. You know, they don't fly. They crawl. You know, so a lot of times they're not in the air. You know, so they're in, you know, wooded areas, grassy areas, shrubs, things of that sort. You know, so they're typically coming from the ground up. You know, so the advice is if you're going to be outdoors in tick-infested areas, wooded areas, and things of that sort, to wear, you know, boots, you know, trousers that you're tucking the trousers over your boots, you know, to try to basically protect your skin essentially. You know, and there's a chemical spray out there called permethrin that you can spray on your clothes, not on your skin, but you can spray on your clothes, on your boots, and it basically wards off ticks essentially. If you spray it directly on a tick, it kills them. It's probably one of the only chemicals you can buy over the counter that kills ticks on direct contact. You know, with long hair, you want to have it, you know, in a ribbon. I know nothing about hair,
Right.
you know, you know, but you certainly you don't want it, you know, loose, you know, you want it nice and tightly bunched. But the main thing is once you go out, you know, you're done with the day, you come back in, take off all the clothes, and make sure you check yourself for ticks, and maybe even have somebody else check, because you can't check your back and things like that. Ticks tend to go, you know, in the lines of the scalp, sometimes in the armpits, you know, in the groin areas, you know, so you can basically just try to feel all over it to see if you feel a bump, you know, and have someone look to see what's there. You don't know when you get bitten by a tick.
Right.
It's so subtle, you know, and that's what I was saying with mosquitoes, you know, sometimes they're already in there, you know, feeding on you before you even realize anything is there. And for the younger kids, it's, you know, incumbent on the parents to make sure you're, you know, looking in the hair, checking their skin and everywhere. Obviously, you're not going to go with a fine-tooth comb, but once you get your hands in there, you should, because half of their body is usually sticking out. You know, so a lot of times you'll feel a bump or feel something. You may even just see a little black spot.
Okay.
You know, depending on what age the tick is. When they're really little, they still bite. You know, they're still going to feed on you. But when you look, it may just literally be a small black dot.
So that's a misconception then, that the ticks that are carriers of Lyme, not all ticks carry Lyme,
No,
right?
it's mostly deer ticks, yeah.
Okay, so it's the deer ticks, but that they don't have to be a specific size.
No.
Okay, because I always thought that it was only the teeny tiny ones that could transfer Lyme's disease.
No, so, and that's the thing is, so I have parents that sometimes bring the tick in for me also to take a look at it. I'm like, well, I don't know what's inside exactly. I can't test it. It looks like a deer tick.
Right.
You know, so I just try to kind of do like a general, preventative type thing, whereas, you know, regardless of how big or small the tick is, if you see it, the goal is to get it out as soon as possible. Most times it takes about 36 hours or more for the tick to actually transmit Lyme's disease. You know, so if you didn't have a tick at 12 o'clock p.m. in the day, you went out hiking, you're back home at 6 and you see the tick, get it out as soon as possible. The likelihood that it's going to give you Lyme's disease is very, very low.
Okay.
And there are a lot of tick removal tools that are out there that you can buy, but even if you just have, some pretty strong tweezers, you always want to get as close to the skin as possible, and grab, not squeeze the tick. Just get a firm hold of it and just try to pull as straight up as possible. Don't, shimmy it and wiggle it. Just try to, pull it out as straight up as possible. If you can't get it out, go to your doctor, go to the nearest urgent care, and they'll be able to get it out for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you do with the tick when you take it off? Or if you find a tick in your house?
So a lot of people try to, again, save it in a Ziploc bag and send it for testing. That's, again, especially if it's bitten you. If you have the permethrin, again, it's a spray that kills directly on contact.
Oh, I should get that. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to flush it, right?
You can.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, you can flush it.
So that's another one. My husband's like, you're not supposed to flush it because sometimes it'll come back up. We have made up all these things about ticks over a lifetime.
You could, kill it, put it in a thing, squeeze it up in a tissue and flush it down the toilet. It's
So Lyme's disease it's an autoimmune disease or no?
No, it's not an autoimmune. So it's a disease it's a disease that's caused by, the tick biting you.
Okay.
And it's not, the thing with Lyme's disease is you don't get bitten by a tick today and you have symptoms tomorrow. One of the earliest symptoms you see is just a rash.
Okay.
It's like a bullseye.
Within the first week?
Within the first 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
You see that. And the bullseye rash is typically around the site of the bite, but it doesn't necessarily have to be right there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's sometimes you don't know you got bitten by a tick, and the tick finishes off on you and falls off.
Mm-hmm.
You may see just a little red dot with like a bump on there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what bit you. So I can't tell if it was a tick that bit you or a mosquito when I look at it. But if you come in 2 weeks later, you have a rash that looks like a target or a bullseye rash. In my head, I'm like, oh, it was probably a tick you got bitten. So if you were to see that rash, go to your doctor right away.
Okay.
Because at that point, you have, what they call primary Lyme's disease. That's the first, the early version of it. And you get treated with antibiotics for about, 2 to 3 weeks that can prevent you from developing, the later versions of Lyme disease, which is where you start seeing, the headaches and the joint pain, and, heart issues and things of that sort.
Yeah.
So that's the part we're trying to avoid. If you get a tick that bites you and maybe you're like, I think this thing was on there for 36 hours, but you take it out. Again, if you see your doctor right away, they can give you, an antibiotic. Typically it's just one pill, depending on your age, that actually can prevent you from developing even that early stage of Lyme's disease.
Okay.
So it's always good to, when in doubt, if you have questions after you've gotten bitten by a tick, just call your doctor up and see, if there are any precautions you can take right away to avoid developing Lyme's disease.
So if you see the rash and you're able to get the antibiotic in time, you potentially could not test positive for Lyme's in the future.
You probably will test positive for Lyme's. So testing positive for Lyme's just means you have Lyme's disease.
Got it.
The concern is which is
symptoms.
it the primary one you have, the secondary, the tertiary? So we try to keep it to just the rash, and once you get treated, a lot of times you don't develop the further stages. And I also have patients sometimes where they get bitten by a tick, the medication that we give, it's not, typically we don't give it to kids under 8 just because of some of the side effects. So there's certain parents that are like, I just want to know if my kid has Lyme's disease. Because you may test positive for Lyme's disease and not even be showing symptoms yet. So I can't test you for Lyme's for about 5-6 weeks after a tick bite.
Okay.
You don't get bitten by a tick today and go test it for Lyme's tomorrow. Typically it takes about 5 or 6 weeks for those antibodies to develop in your body for us to be able to detect it. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you see a lot of snake bites?
No.
None. Zero.
Never.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm like deathly afraid of snakes. I was always curious if that's like a thing, and I've just been like somehow avoided it.
Yeah, it just probably just depends, what state you're in.
Yeah.
I read all the time about people finding snakes in their homes or in their backyard and things like that.
That is my worst nightmare, I think.
Me too.
And what about spider bites in the summer? Do you see much of that?
So we do. So it's hard to determine what bit you. A lot of parents coming in saying, "Hey, my kid was bitten by a spider bite,"
Right.
but did you see the spider? No, I just, it looks like a spider bite. So it's very, very rare for me to, see someone where the parent categorically saw the spider bite the kid.
Oh, right.
Come in. It's usually,
Or it could be
I'm
a rash,
scared.
right?
It could just be a rash.
Yeah.
It could be a red dot. So it's like, I think it was a spider bite.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we just treat it locally to make sure there's no skin infections.
Yeah.
And kind of go from there. But there are certain spider bites where where you develop, like a black, what they call an eschar, where it's like almost like a black wound, so to speak, like a scab that forms, where it's mostly certain kinds of spiders that do that.
Okay.
But I've probably seen that like maybe 3 or 4 times. I used to work in the emergency room. I remember seeing it 3 times in the span of 6 years.
Oh, okay.
So
it's not
again,
common.
it's not
No.
so common.
Oh, that's interesting. And mosquitoes, so they're, the necessary evil of summertime and enjoying the great outdoors.
Certainly.
I always used to spray myself. I really don't spray anything on me or the kids anymore. We have like a fire pit in the yard and stuff, so I'm hoping that, but what, and also I'd love to even know what you think about the services that people spray all the chemicals in their yards for to keep the mosquitoes away. So what do you suggest for sprays? Does DEET matter? Does it not matter? Is it bad for you? Is it good for you?
All great questions. I just I got a flyer in the mail. I was talking to my wife this morning to see if we should get one of those people to come out. Our neighbors did it. They said it works, but it only lasts for maybe like the first 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, that's it. And then and if it rains a lot, then it's a problem.
So effective. So it does help, but it's a financial thing, so if you can afford to have them come out every, 3 or 4 weeks to spray your yard, then great.
Right.
But in terms of just, I guess, insect, bug repellents and, things like that. So DEET has probably been around for close to 70 years.
Oh.
They used it in the Army, way back in the day, it was when it was developed.
And what is it exactly?
So it's, I think it's called diethyltoluamide, big word, but it's basically a chemical, that is found in a lot of bug sprays to basically ward off, mosquitoes, ticks, and, various insects that bite. It doesn't ward off stinging insects like the wasps and bees and things like that, but your mosquitoes and ticks, and it prevents them from, it's like repulsive to them, so to speak. I think there was a time when DEET was thought to be associated with seizures in kids. And ever since then, it's got a bad rap that, it's not safe, for kids and things like that. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, WHO, they've all over and over again, a lot of research has been done that has proved the safety of DEET. So the recommendation is still like, if you're going to use, bug sprays and insect sprays and things like that, that yes, the ones that have DEET in it they're still very safe. All the research disproved any of those, concerns. The one thing we do see, maybe you have a skin reaction. When you look at a lot of these insect repellents, they have certain percentages, DEET 10%, 30%. Usually the higher the number, the more likely you may see a skin reaction, so to speak. But the numbers, those percentages represent how long you're protected for. So I think 10% covers you for about 3 to 4 hours of outdoor activity. 30% is closer to 6 or 8 hours. I don't know anyone who's out, in the woods that long. But typically I recommend that you use, an insect repellent that has DEET in it. But again, I'm sensitive to families. I'm sensitive to whatever information they read on social media about. So even after I tell you that it's safe, there are other options. There are other insect repellents out there. There's one that has, a substance in it called picaridin, right? It's actually what they use in Europe. That's their first line. That's what they recommend. And it's just as effective as DEET.
Interesting.
Just as effective as DEET. And again, you'll see the percentages on there, 15%, 20%. Again, that really just goes back to how long you're protected for. So the pros and cons between both of them is DEET is, you can get pretty oily after you put it on your skin. Some people don't like the smell either. The other one, the picaridin one, that tends not to be oily, and it doesn't really have like a strong smell, so to speak. But in terms of long term, can this cause issues later on in life? You know, do I worry about something happening to my kid after being exposed to this 5-10 years from now? DEET has been around for 70 years.
Right.
So we know that long-term effect, really, there's not much of anything.
Okay.
The other one, the picaridin, is you know, safe as it is, you know, we don't really know
It's a newer
20, 30, 40
Okay.
years down the line. So that's the
Right.
only thing. There's also oil of eucalyptus,
Yes.
oil of Lebanon eucalyptus. So that the only downside to that is you can't use it for kids under 3.
Oh,
You know, the
interesting.
DEETs and the other one, the picaridin, you can use it for infants as young as 2-3 months.
Okay.
You know, but the eucalyptus one, it's 3 and older.
Why is that?
So it hasn't been studied.
Oh, interesting.
It's really
okay.
so most of the things that are age specific, it's just because we didn't study it in kids younger than this. So I can't tell you whether it's safe or not safe.
Okay.
You know, and there are a lot of other stuff out there, like, you know, the natural
Essential oil
Essential-
people, yeah, all of the
exactly.
different products that are marketed
citronella
to it.
oils, and you know, there's like bean oil and peppermint oil.
Yep.
Again, those are typically for older kids. They are considered safe, you know, but there's not enough literature out there that talks about the efficacy, like the effectiveness of it, you know. So again, I can't really speak to it. I just tell my patients, because I can't force you to use one thing versus another. You know, if you're not going to use DEET, you're not going to use any of those, well, here's another option out there. But typically what I just tell patients is you have to reapply this probably more often, because they tend to last maybe 30 minutes to an hour in terms of protection. There's all these ones out there. There's like a watch, I think, that's like soaked in chemicals, or a band that if you wear it, those doesn't work.
Yeah, I've seen
Right.
those before.
There's
It's like one thing, and I'm like, I don't know if that's going to cover your whole body.
Like
but
ultrasonic waves.
Yeah.
Those things, I tend to stay away from them. And there's some that combine the sunscreen and the bug repellent
Okay.
into one cream. I advise against those because sunscreen, you have to really apply it, and you have to tend to reapply it. If you're reapplying that, you're overdoing the
Yeah.
bug spray as well.
Right.
You know, and speaking of bug spray, I don't like the sprays.
Oh, interesting.
You can inhale it, especially with the kids.
Okay.
You know, so I typically have parents spray it on their hands and then just rub it on, only on exposed skin.
Okay.
You know, don't rub it all over the kid's body and puts clothes on it. You know, just exposed skin.
Oh, good to know. What about bee stings?
What about bee stings?
Well, so my daughter is 8, and she has not been stung before. So how, like, are you supposed to, like, what is it, like an EpiPen you would need? Like, so how do you know that, like, your kid isn't allergic to bees?
You don't.
You don't, right?
You don't. That's the scary thing about allergies, is you don't know until you're exposed to it. You know, I don't know I'm allergic to peanuts until I, you know, eat a peanut butter sandwich and I get a rash everywhere and my eyes blow up. So with bee stings, again, it's best to try to, you know, it's hard to avoid it, but there are a lot of plants that, you know, flowers that, you know, attract bees, you know, perfumes, certain scented soaps and lotions. So I tell patients and families all the time, if you're going to be outdoors, stay away from the scents.
Okay.
Bees love good smells, you know, so if you're putting perfume on and you're outdoors, you may attract a bee, so to speak, you know. So if you do get stung by a bee, there's really nothing, you know, special you have to do. Just simple soap and water. You know, you could put a little bacitracin ointment or Neosporin, any antibiotic ointment, just to kind of keep it from getting infected, so to speak. If you get stung by a bee and all of a sudden, you know, your eyes swell up, rash everywhere, shortness of breath, that's a 911 call. Now, at that point, I know you're allergic to bee stings. after you've had that first experience. So at that point, if you were to go to the hospital or to your doctor, they give you a prescription for an EpiPen.
Okay.
So now you have an EpiPen in the event
And you
you
carry
get
it with
stung
you
by it,
everywhere.
but you carry it with you everywhere.
So if you have a child who's who is commonly more allergic to certain things like peanut butter, or they just have more allergies, are they predisposed to being allergic to bees, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
It's just a specific allergy that you have to the bee sting.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that always scares me, because you never, not only do kids, not obviously want to get bit by stung, and they're always so afraid of bees, but if you're in an area where you're not quickly able to get to medical care, it can be.
You're very right.
Is it common?
Most of, I guess, the people who've come around already have had their scary
I've
episode.
had their area,
And a lot of times you see really just the swelling of the eyes and the mouth, but not necessarily the I can't breathe. It happens, but it's not very common. So most patients, most people, I'm calling everybody a patient. Most people are able to get help, in time before any of the respiratory and scary things develop.
Okay.
Because if you get stung by a bee on your arm and all of a sudden your eyes blow up, most people are rushing to nearest urgent care or hospital, if they see that.
So if you remember the movie My Girl from when we were younger, and little boy gets stung and he dies. He has he gets stung multiple times, right? But he was allergic to everything. So if someone gets stung by multiple times by wasps or whatever, and they're not allergic, they'll be okay. They'll just be sore.
They'll just have a bunch of lesions on their body, a bunch of red spots on their body.
Okay. Yeah, because wasps can sting multiple times,
certainly,
right? Yeah.
Certainly.
So, oh my gosh, all the things. Well,
hopefully it's a fun summer that's free of all these bugs and insect stings.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been so helpful. We've covered a lot of different summer safety topics today. What's the biggest message, that you want to drive home to parents?
So, have fun. I feel like summer has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
But don't take all of these. Take all of these tips very, very, very importantly. As much as we love the sun is and can be harmful. So just sunscreen, reapply as often as you need to. The water safety, drownings still happen every. I think it's close to 1,000 drownings, that lead to fatalities every year in kids in America.
Wow.
So it happens a lot, so let's make sure that we are focused when we're out there watching our kids swim, preferably being there with them. We talked about the insect repellents, but yeah, have fun. Hydrate. Drink lots of water, drink lots of electrolytes. It's important.
Super important. Again, super helpful. I learned a lot today. There was a lot of information that I was,
It may change in a couple of years.
Yeah,
so
right.
For now, that's what we have.
That's great. Super helpful. I'm excited to continue this series with Hackensack Meridian Children's Health. We're going to be talking about lots of different important topics this summer and going into the fall and into the rest of 2023. Hopefully we helped parents out there learn a bit more and be more cognizant of what we're doing this summer, but also remember to have fun with your families and don't be terrified to send them outside now.
Exactly. I hope I didn't scare anyone. It's fun. Look, we love the outdoors. My kids cry when they're indoors. The activity is fun. Go out there, let them play and
get them off
exercise.
get them off the screens.
Get them off the screens. Get them off the video games. Enjoy the outdoors.
We can
Just
talk about
safe.
that too, but
exactly.
that's a
different topic.
Different topic. So yes, please less screen time this summer.
Yes.
So, but enough that you can get your work done, because that also saves me.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
This summer, just look ahead for Monmouth Moms. We have our outdoor dining guide coming out soon. Okay. So if you want to head out with the family or with friends or with your partner and enjoy the great outdoors, waterside along Monmouth County, we have our dining guide coming out very soon. So we're excited about that. Lots of food. Yeah, lots of great options to have some good seafood by the beach, by the bay. such a beautiful area, and we're so lucky to be able to frequent all of these great places. And then also our guide to local beaches and pools is coming out. It should be out by the end of May. And each year we put out a detailed guide of all the different beaches in Monmouth County, and all the daily pass information, where to get your season passes, all the different splash pads to visit. We have all the different pool clubs in there, so what memberships you can get at different pool clubs, and then also the beach clubs. I know a lot of them have waiting lists, but we have everyone listed there, so you can take your pick and make a bucket list and put all kinds of fun plans in place to get to the beaches and pools safely.
Exactly.
And then we also have our free activities guide coming out soon too. So lots of things to explore in Monmouth County this summer, and it doesn't have to cost a dime. So we'd like to highlight all the different park systems that offer different programs that you can just go and enjoy with your family for the day. And just lots of activities, maybe thinking outside the box, but going for a bike ride, or going to fossil hunting, and lots of different things in there. So that'll be out soon too. Lots of things planned for the summer, and we're excited to continue letting you know all that's happening in Monmouth County.
Awesome.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.